This is when I started to realise that I was actually, and not just me, but millions of other people across the world were right. Because the density and ferocity in which the media sources, and I mean every media source, all the way across the whole board, the tabloids, every which end of it, they went to town on me and this other gentleman. We were labelled as terrorists. We were labelled, the Parachute Regiment at the time, obviously being misinformed and not having any information, decided that we were cancerous cells that should have been cut out of society. It's not just me, it's not just you. There are millions and millions of people out there who are now standing with us shoulder to shoulder, but more importantly, without aggression, just with nothing but love. That's the fuel in this machine. It's love. That's it. You pour it in and off we go. It's done.
I'm delighted to be here this morning with Gianmarco Bruin. We've just spent 5 incredible days together as we toured from the United Kingdom on the road to Geneva to our rally that we hosted on the 1st of June in the heart of Geneva outside the United Nations, alongside 50 speakers, an incredible event. I had you by my side all the way through this process. You're part of our security detail, with us in the car on the road to Geneva, the convoy, many stories, bumps and challenges. You're an ex-serving Parachute Regiment veteran of 5 years, including operational tours in Afghanistan. And undoubtedly those skills have now given you an expertise that you can bring to the work that we're doing here. So we've had an amazing time in Geneva, but I'm curious, how did you end up part of this network, this community that's grown since 2020?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I came into it typically like any sort of ex-Parachute Regiment soldier would do, face first, 100 miles an hour. Obviously, back when the start of all of these words that we're so accustomed to now, COVID, lockdown, etc., 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 when those words first started coming out, I'll be honest with you, the soldier in me, the military in me, had just an immediate sort of compliance level. It's the pattern that I'm used to following. So I done what was asked of me at first. I kept myself out of the way. I lived in an environment where I wasn't around a lot of people anyway. We had the shopping delivered to the house anyway, so all that kind of that palaver was covered for us. Really, we didn't really have to interact with it a lot. But I went out and I put a mask on my face, and I was going away with a friend of mine. We were going up to the Lake District, and we were going to go camping. And I was walking around, go outdoors, and I had this mask on my face. And typically I had a little camo one because obviously, I've been a veteran and I was, just clinging on to it as you do sometimes. And I've had conversations with my friend, and he'd been sort of just he's really kind. He was really gentle with me. He wasn't aggressive, and I'm so grateful for it. He just sort of drip feeding me information and letting me sit with it. And eventually, over a bit of time, as I say, I was in the shop and I sent him a video saying to ask what tent are we going to get to share. And he just looked at me, he just laughed about the tent, and he just said, "Marco, my brother, I beg of you, can you take that mask off? I can't see your beautiful face." And it did. I took the mask off, I folded it up, I put it on the side and go outdoors, and I walked out and I never put one on my face again. And then about 5 days later, which just happened to be running into the start of August, I really started to realise that something wasn't quite right. And there was a certain mentality, a certain approach that was coming from the people that I'd spent so much of my life learning or aspiring to be like and respect, and organisations and government bodies that I would normally listen to intently. And I started to notice a little bit of a flicker of a militarised psychological pressure, and I started to realise and see correlations between the history books that I've read and speaking to gentlemen that have been on many, many more operational tours of duty than myself. And I started to see a sort of concurrence, and I thought, actually, this is a little bit of what seems like a media-based or digital-based sort of warfare here. There doesn't seem to genuinely be any sort of freedom of choice for these people. There's a lot of fear being driven in and not a lot of science being given out to back it up. So I spoke to a couple of other people, and I reached out to another ex-Parachute Regiment, an incredible human being. Again, I won't get into names, but he's been an absolute lion amongst the others and been from my side from day one. And I connected with this gentleman, and he helped me understand the gravity of what was going on, and there was a potential that we could maybe bring some value with the skill set that the government embedded into us previously with the Parachute Regiment. So what I've done was I've been watching all these parades and these beautiful gatherings of all these people getting together and exchanging their understanding of what was going on in the world, and it motivated me. So I spoke to this gentleman. I said, right, let's see if we can bring some value to the table. I haven't seen any kind of military or veteran substance to these marches or anything like that yet. Should we go? Let's just go and see what the fuss is about. I've never been. The energy must be high. So we agreed, and 4 days later, on the 9th of August, which just typically happened to be my birthday, we turned up to go to at the back end of one of what turned out to be one of the biggest marches when London marches really started to grow in sort of, you know, the amount of humans that were paying attention and actually being brave enough to come out on the streets and be part of, you know, what things have become now. So we turned up, and two of the people that had some sort of involvement with the organisation, these two guys come over. I ended up really quite falling in love with one of them, you know, as a human being, you know, watching what he was doing and having awe and admiration. And they had asked and said, look, can you help us? And I looked at the other gentleman I was with, and we said, yeah, of course, we'd love to. And they asked us for a lot because obviously they're military. And I was like, look, we don't have helicopters, we don't have 50 guys, like, we're not serving. We're these berets on our head are just simply a representation to the people around you to let them know that there are people that have been sort of quite deeply embedded into the system and the government, and shared that parallel and focus of where the world was going, that have started to realise something's not quite right. So we said, look, let's narrow the column of what you'd like us to do down to what we can actually offer you. We can do the mapping out and logistics. We can make sure the traffic stop. There's only 2 of us. There's thousands of you. We'll put one at the front, one at the back, and we'll navigate you through the streets of London, because we've heard the trend with certain human beings that don't like what you're doing, taking your parade off in the wrong direction and then discrediting you from a media purpose. So if we can stop that one thing, that might help. I said, secondarily to that, we've also noticed that sometimes there seems to be just the odd few. I don't mean a lot. I just mean a little handful, especially the younger generation, who are dissolving this information and understandably becoming quite angry about it. And, you know, and they come along to the parades. It'd be a beautiful Saturday, sunny day. So some people like to have a beer, you know, and unfortunately that combination would edge some of these younger lads who were a little bit misinformed at the time, or maybe they were brought into the understanding by someone who had aggression in their soul rather than love, and they've then replicated that on the street side. But the media were using that as a very strong way to disempower all the beautiful, kind, gentle-hearted people that were on the movements. So we said, we'll try and keep an eye on that at the back. And I said, outside of that, if anybody's going to get punched on the face by TSG or anything, we'll try to make sure it's us. So we had a bit of a laugh about it, and the parade started, and we all walked off. And I tell you what, it just gets me emotional. The energy and to see families of 3, you know, a mum and a dad, and then this beautiful little baby strapped to the chest and the chest rig, and then they'd look down, and then there'd be another little toddler rolling along. And I was like, this isn't a group of like angry patriotic lunatics that have got England socks, England flip-flops, England, you know, stuff like that, and Benidorm. These are multinational people and families that are genuinely just trying to raise awareness. And some weren't even trying to do that. Some were just trying to be present with what was going on to show like a level of solidarity. So it was all lovely. We was walking along, and we was getting amongst it, and I was at the front, and the other gentleman was bringing up the side and the rear, making sure that everyone stayed together, because you want to keep the numbers up, obviously. And all of a sudden, we was walking along, and all of a sudden I looked over, and there's a silver vehicle pulls up next to the gentleman I'm working with, and then a similar silver vehicle pulls up next to me. And I looked over my shoulder. My guys obviously clocked it, they're there, and then out jumped 2 police officers with like these long dark blue overalls on, and like a camera set and a few other bits and bobs. And I was like, they've just dropped one off of me and one off of him, so they obviously really don't like what we're doing. They want everything that we're doing to be videoed. I looked at the gentleman that I was working with on that day, and he just looked up and he smiled, and we knew what to do. This, with the utmost respect, and again, just these 2 particular gentlemen from that particular organisation weren't in the greatest of shape, so we thought we'd use that gently and in a comedic sort of way to our benefit. So I looked at that gentleman, and he looked at me, and we burst out laughing, and we just ran. And you should have seen these 2 gentlemen, these police officers with the cameras, didn't know what to do, because this is what we do with the psychological games we played. So we were running off ahead, stopping traffic, doing a lap of the block before the public caught up, just wearing these guys down. And one of the gentlemen was actually ended up nearly throwing up by the bin, and I was kind enough to actually offer him my bottle of water as I walked past. And it was like a really gentle, loving way of just saying, we are trained to a very different level to you. Like, we are not here to be horrible. We're genuinely trying to help. You know, we could have been aggressive. We could have, you know, sort of gone for like the common law perspective with shoving cameras in faces and the harassment. I was like, no, let's use a little bit more of a gentle way just to establish where we're sitting in this. And so we'd done that. We had a good laugh, and then we got up to the point where there was a roundabout up at the top. And I don't actually live in London. The other gentleman does, but we didn't really know exactly what the route was. They just said, this is where we'd like to get to, and they pointed out the roundabout on the map, and we said, perfect. So I was at the front, we got up, and I stopped all the traffic on both sides of the roundabout, and there's 4 junctions on this roundabout as well, so there's only one of us, so we're quite busy. And I'm standing there, and all of a sudden the distance between the front of the group and myself started to get bigger and bigger. And not to the point where they were too distant, but about 100 metres. And all of a sudden, I noticed the gentleman I was working with come up beside me, and he's like, they've all sort of stopped. And I turned around, and then all of these thousands of people just turned towards this building, and they were off. And I mean, they were off, you know. It's like a scene out of Warriors, you know, like the whole tribe just running together towards this building. And there's a lot of excitement. There was no question with it, but people all of a sudden knew where they were going and they wanted to get there quickly. The gentleman I was working with and I noticed what they were doing. We realised there was actually a couple of police officers on the door of this building, and if we didn't get there first, everything this group of people was trying to achieve was going to be demolished, because if any sign of aggression occurred on that, it just discredits what is supposed to be a peaceful movement set up by peaceful people. So our objective was to get to that door first, and essentially this is where the images, as I've mentioned before, ended up on the front page of the media, because they're quite good at using those images to sort of really strengthen the words that come underneath it. And because obviously we were under so much pressure to get there at speed, and obviously we were dressed appropriately, and we still have things like it's just typical ex-veteran, you know, veteran or ex-soldier. We're always carrying olive green everything, you know. So my rucksack happened to be that colour, the other gentleman's happened to be that colour. We both turned up in a black top with running trainers on. So it was just, so we made this beeline to get there, but everything was in the way, you know. There was like a Costa coffee and kids and a little fountain and everything. So the papers basically had me and this other gentleman on like an angle, almost like a bit of a Mo Farah sort of,
like a beeline for it.
And then all of a sudden, it was like a Rizzler paper between who was going to get there first. And I'm so glad that I've spent time operationally with the people that we do this with, because we're just so in tune. And as soon as we got there, we knew that the only way was to de-escalate aggression immediately. So much to the people behind us surprise, the first thing that we did when we got to the front priest line was raise our hands immediately. We are not here to cause a threat. I know we've come towards you at speed, and you know, and the other guy's quite a large human being, you know. So I imagine, you know, so just immediately, international sign of no aggression, put your hands up in the air. And I tell you what, the physical response we got from those police officers on that door, I really wasn't prepared for it. And that's when I realised how long I've been out of the army for, because I should have been able to predict an obvious response was going to be anger and fear and protection. But I thought just the two of us at the front would have been enough. But all the thousands of people behind us amplified it. So I'll be honest with you, my beret got knocked off my head. You know, the guys we've had to pick me up off the floor. And there's every inch of my soul. The paratroopers me like, you can fold this could be over pretty quickly if you and this other gentleman decided to go the other way about it. And it was hard, because I'm not used to being in that environment where there's an element of, right, okay, you could be injured here, and not having the freedom to defend myself in the manner in which I would normally feel accustomed to or would naturally do. So that was our entry into this movement. You know, we turned up to be part of just to tag along and chat to people and say, look, there are veterans that are aware of this, and there's a few soldiers that are still serving that are starting to see something's not quite right. You know, no one was making any factual statements or definitions. You know, people were just starting to murmur, oh, I'm not too sure about what's going on here. So yeah, in true Marco form, that was it. Face first, 100 miles an hour. We're here, can we help?
So, I mean, that's an incredible story. And that's actually the first time I saw your face, actually, you know, because of the reporting on the situation, you know, because similarly, you know, I'd been watching, well, I've been part of what was going on, you know, since right at the beginning, really. So almost every major march in London, I was there with my camera gear doing reports. I remember that march very, very well. And from there on, you know, I saw you spoke in Birmingham, and, you know, you've done so much now to support this movement. But I'm curious to explore, given that publicity around not only your involvement at that point, but with the beret.
Yeah.
What was the response from other people that you'd been in service with, other servicemen? How did they respond to your involvement at that point?
Well, I'll tell you what, I didn't know what I was walking into on the day, so I wasn't really aware there was going to be any response at that time, because from being asked to do what we were doing and what we ended up doing were very, very different. Yes. So initially, when I walked into the situation, I thought, they'd be like, is that Marco? Oh, he's got the beret. What's he doing with the beret on? Come on, leave the beret out of it. I get what you're doing, but do that. And I thought that would have been it. But obviously, because, this is when I started to realise that I was actually, and not just me, but millions of other people across the world were right. because the density and ferocity in which the media sources, and I mean every media source, all the way across the whole board, the tabloids, every which end of it, they went to town on me and this other gentleman. We were labelled as terrorists. We were labelled, the Parachute Regiment at the time, obviously being misinformed and not having any information, decided that we were cancerous cells that should have been cut out of society, and that our history of an involvement with the Parachute Regiment, and bear in mind one of the other gentlemen has been on multiple operational hostile tours with a very specialised part of the Parachute Regiment, and to sort of disarm us by almost putting you in that sort of Walter Mitty category, you know. They ramped into areas of mental health without doing any verifications on it, and they utilised small information about the other gentleman that I spent time with and just blew it out of context, and they highlighted very specific things that would get a very specific reaction from the serving men and women of the British Army. You know, they tried to make out like the gentleman I was with refused a tour of duty, which absolutely was not the case. What happened was this particular gentleman had already 10 years into whilst being in the military realised that something wasn't quite right. He was planning to get out of the military, and they decided to sort of counter offer with an opportunity to go abroad again. But quite rightly, within his own decision as a human being, he decided that his involvement with that level of violence in a foreign country was done. After 2 or 3 tours at 4, 5, 6 months, I think that's enough of any man. And he'd made that decision, and they decided to jump on that and make out like he'd refused a tour of duty, and then went into the streets of London on a rampage the next day. And it was mad. And I remember speaking to this gentleman. I was saying, look, we're just today's news. Tomorrow, it'll be gone. It'll be somebody else, some, I don't know, Love Island or whatever is going on. You know, something will replace it. It'll be a footballer that's, you know, his laces are undone, and that will cover the front page for the next 6 weeks. We're all good. And 4 days later, my phone's getting 120 messages a day still. And because I don't absorb any media sources or generic media sources, and the television has, you know, it doesn't get watched anymore. I don't pick up any tabloid papers. It's just something that I choose not to expose myself to anymore. I was only finding out the gravity of the sort of digital and sort of media-based assault from other people, predominantly in my family. And the mentality was, you know, I'd have aunts and uncles, for example, calling up, you know, my mum and going, like, I think Marco's like properly falling through the roof this time. Like, we really think he's actually lost it. And
forgot to launch his parachute.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that sort of thing. And but again, at the same time, they just kind of thought this was typical behaviour of me, because historically I have had pretty wild behaviour. A lot of gentlemen that end up, you know, approaching a regiment with this sort of standard of soldiering that the Parachute Regiment have. You kind of have to be a few sandwiches short of a picnic to approach it in the first place, you know. So it was dense. It was aggressive. So what I had to do is I had to use psychology, loving psychology and gentle psychology, to try and see if I could turn this mentality of the soldiers that had been exposed to the media's version of that situation into something that was more balanced, and something where they could take some value out of it, or at least critique it off their own back, rather than just being punched in the face with the media's version. And then typically the universe, you know, looks after you, and I got an opportunity to speak in Birmingham. And so when I had the opportunity, I was like, right, this could be a big right hook for you. This could be the last involvement you have in this, because there's people that I know personally that have served in regiments similar, that have had less involvement than I had, even with the few little days out I'd done on the streets of London, that were actually in jail. So there are 2 men that I know personally that have spoken less, done less inside this movement, that are currently still in jail at this moment in time. So I had to be really cautious of how I approached this speech, and I thought, I'm not going to write anything. I'm just going to turn up, and I'm just going to hope for the best, just you know, and trust. But realistically, what I did was I needed the attention of the Parachute Regiment soldiers, and I needed it in a way that was going to not end up in the result from the previous day out.
Yes.
So one of the things that's really quite prominent in that particular regiment is obviously the positioning of how you wear your beret. When you come into the regiment and you've earned your beret, the cap badge has to be sat in a certain place, more over your left eyebrow, and it has to be predominant, so you can see like the black leather line on the underside of it. But as you progress through the regiment and you do, you know, you go on peacetime operations, and then you get away and do some hostile environment work, you sort of level up in the respects a little bit. And the commonality for that regiment, the little traits of the paratrooper, were a really heavily faded maroon T-shirt to show how many miles you put on your legs. the sideburns would start to come down a little bit and come in a little bit.
Yeah.
And then the beret would start to sort of cap a little bit, and the representation of, I think it is, historically it comes from service in Africa to keep the sun out of the paratroopers' eyes when they're in the desert. And then as you spend more time, the cap badge progressively gets a little bit closer to the ear. So when I actually stepped up onto the stage, I had to use the beret as a tool. It was purely and simply just to draw the attention of the beautiful... these are my brothers. Nothing about what I set out to do was to upset or embed fear or for anger to be the sort of the cause. You know, I didn't want to ruffle feathers, but I served for these men. I've watched some of these men give their lives. I've watched some of these men repeatedly put themselves in incredibly violent situations in protection of a belief system that, for me personally, and I want to repeat that, for me personally, didn't actually exist. So I wanted to be...
What do you mean by that?
Well, the motivations that sort of cumulatively helped me get over the difficult times in entering that regiment and training and doing it were under the understanding, absolute certainty and conviction through my exposure to what I absorbed from the media, was that there were men and women out there of a particular culture and background from a specific country that had done something bad to a building in America, and then off the back of that there was this call out for young people to sort of stand and do their thing, and if we didn't, there would be potentially more of these situations occurring on a worldwide basis. So the thought of my mother or my dad or my brother or sister going to work in London and something like that happening, I wasn't ready to allow that to happen in this country. So if I could be a small cog in that massive machine that would stop that happening, and a preventative measure by stopping the enemy threat in their own home turf from being in, you know, the likes of London, then that was valuable and I would go and do it. And then for me personally, after having sort of come out of my service, I realised that there is quite a lot of underlying alternative potential reasons to had been in that country for the length of time and the way we were operating. It seemed like there was a multi-pronged or, you know, multifaceted thing going on that was a little bit outside of my sight at the time, and I had to come out and look back on it with hindsight to see that. But essentially, I wanted to try and make other soldiers aware of that in a polite way and help them understand how the system exists and how it operated. But essentially with the beret, I needed some of the more senior members to be roused up by it. So I put the cap badge right by my ear, knowing that the lads were going to go wild. I was like, in my head, I'm going, I'm so sorry, my brothers. I know this is going to hurt, but I need your attention. And I don't care if you're angry. I don't care if you want to turn up at my door. I don't care if you want to fight about it. I just need you to be aware. So I put it round there. And as you can imagine, that was right. They went absolutely wild about it. But typically, because the lads are in the barracks and sometimes you go through really basic times where you don't have a lot to do, all there is to do is talk about current affairs and what's going on. So obviously I knew that I'd be the hot topic, but I also know just generically with a lot of men, our attention span is really quite short. So I thought once the whole barracks has got over the beret, they've only got one thing left to do, and that's listen. So I thought, put your head on a chopping board, take the hit that comes with the beret, but if you get asked to speak again, make sure you show them that the beret was used as a tool. So the next speech, when I was kindly asked to go and speak in Birmingham, the first thing I did was take the beret off, explain with love why I was doing it.
I am fiercely proud of the service that I have served. My brothers and sisters that have laid down their lives, many of them to provide us with the element of freedom that we thought that we were providing for the great people of the United Kingdom and on a global basis. Now, I have no shame in the service that I did and the men and women that I served with, and the reason being my motivation for service. I was blindsided, and I truly, truly believe with every fibre that ran through my body that I was doing the right thing. I was believing that I was protecting the beautiful people that I see stood in front of me and my precious friends and family that I have at home. And to watch so many of those people make the ultimate sacrifice, to watch those freedoms be so washed away by all these democratic over-perspectives and all these views that are taking our freedoms now, I've decided that I'd rather stand here in front of you beautiful people as nothing more than just a human being.
And you know, I tried to use that method, like almost in the way we were being suppressed with this kind of psychological warfare. I was trying to reverse it, transcend that into a positive thing, and use love to put it back. It was like taking the negative energy in, transmuting it because I had the ability and the knowledge and the information to do so, and then structure a step-by-step way of bringing the attention to what I was trying to say. And and it worked. You know, there was a lot of backlash. I mean, everything from the Instagram profile and the Facebook that I had at the time went wild, and it took the lads a lot of time. So what I did was I just responded with love hearts to all the lads, just single love hearts. Those that reached out, just love heart, love heart, love heart, love heart. And then I got collared on the streets one day by an alternative media source. It just caught me off guard. And it was like the third and final piece of the puzzle. And I didn't plan this. It kind of happened organically, which also kind of helped me from the spiritual side, really trust that I was doing the right thing. So the third speech, there was no beret, didn't have it in my hand. It had nothing to do with the regiment. And the gentleman was just simply asking me about what I felt I was achieving. And I said I had to open a door for service personnel, not just the Parachute Regiment. I'm going to be slightly biased because I served there and I haven't earned any other beret. This is the only one I've got. I can't start wearing Marine berets and saying, oh, you lot, because then I'd end up with lots of regiments angry at me rather than just my own one, you know. But yeah, and on that particular conversation, I just simply said I wanted to open the door for them. I wanted to put a wedge under it so they knew it was always open. But I said, unfortunately, first I had to build the house that the door was going to go in, build the door, and then put a lock in it so that I could open it for them. You know, So there was a process to opening that door, and now, 2 and a bit years later, probably even potentially edging into 3. I'm bad with things like that. Now they know that door's open, and because the generic media sources have, I'm not quite sure why, but obviously it might be scientifically based, intel based. The mass is starting to sort of wanting to understand a little bit more, but it seemingly turns out that door is open, and there are quite a large amount of those gentlemen starting to just poke their head through it and just have a little bit of a look. And when I got a few messages from a couple of lads I served with, the support all of a sudden changed after that third message. And then now, on the odd occasion I am seen on social media, I get so much support, it has me in tears, because I had to really, really break my brothers' hearts. I had to go out on a digital warfare assault against the men that I pledged my life to, men that I have watched give their life for a cause that I was questioning was even in existence, but there had to be a process because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't do this. And all of a sudden then, I realised that the things that I found myself having mental health issues for, the guilt of not being injured on a tour, the guilt of not having sustained injury. And as we've mentioned in a separate conversation, I spent a small amount of my time actually stuck in Camp Bastion with an injury to go out. So I had that guilt in myself, you know. And it was just been an absolutely immense emotional journey. But for me, I feel like now there's enough going on outside of there. There's enough questions in the normal media narrative that hopefully those beautiful men and women of service can say, even if it's just on their own, in their own car when they're driving down the M25 in their own space, just sort of say, do you know what, maybe that little lunatic was right, maybe something's not quite right. And if anybody, even one, which seems to be the case, has done a U-turn on it, then it was absolutely worth it. Like, I love those men. I'm absolutely fiercely proud of my service, because we genuinely from the bottom of our hearts believed that we were doing the right thing. And that's the only reason I can sleep at night, because that part of me, that version of me, that historic version of who I am today, really, really, really believed that I was doing the right thing.
Wow. I mean, there's so much there. And it's fascinating to hear about what you did with the beret, because for the people in front of you, the majority of them wouldn't have a clue that was a sign. You know, that was your statement that a very select audience would understand. You know, and I've watched that first speech multiple times. I've watched that second speech. And I like to hope that any serving personnel that watch that first speech, once they get over that initial outrage, and, you know, it's a pattern interrupt, you know, it's a way to get people's attention, and it's very, very smart. But I struggle to believe that there isn't a single service person that would watch that and not have some level of pride in what you did there, because it was so direct to a really humanitarian message. There was nothing in there that was political. It wasn't making a statement about what these people are doing. It was with great respect. You opened by saying, that every individual in those entities, whether it's the NHS, whether it's government, whether it's military, 99% of them are there doing what they believe is best for humankind. And there's just a 1% that perhaps have different interests. And I think it showed such respect. But you really go on to speak to the heart of humanity and what we're dealing here. And I find it fascinating because the same call that led you to step up and join the military in some ways felt, from what you described to me, is a similar calling. You see that your concern for your brothers and sisters of humanity, and you rose to service again. But it's so fascinating because it feels like such a different environment. There's parallels there. But what you're applying to this is so unique. I mean, as I said, I've had the pleasure of spending 5 days with you now. You are one of the most loving, beautiful human souls I've ever come across. So inspiring. And, for me personally, you've been here supporting me on this journey and our team on this journey. But I've taken such inspiration from what you're about as a human being. And I'm just curious, how you've translated that parallel experience into what you're doing now, because you are really a beacon of hope, an inspiration at a time of darkness. Honestly, people won't have maybe have seen this, but I've seen it firsthand for 5 solid days. Wow. We've barely slept. We've been alongside each other this whole journey. And I think, wow, both of those speeches that you gave to me embodied that piece of the story. And I feel like we're at this unique moment in history where we are looking for people like you to stand up and actually say, I represent something. I'm here in service of humanity and our brothers and sisters. And there is a different way. Having the courage against everything else to do what you've done is so impeccable. I mean, what was the shift for you? I mean, how does it all sit with you now? You stepped up outside the BBC back in August 2020 on your birthday.
Yeah.
And now here we are just back from Geneva. What's your assessment of where things are right now, and how do you see your role in where we are?
Well, to be honest with you, again, like I say, sort of touching on something I might have mentioned earlier, having had such resentment for actually having physically got through, being in Afghanistan and watching other men having been hurt, to then sort of find myself having to digest that. I had a guilt that I wasn't injured or other people were, or they hadn't come back, etc., etc., etc. To then all of a sudden realise that the reason that I was trained, the reason that I wasn't in an environment where I could have been hurt, the reason why I didn't get hurt, all sort of culminated into the fact that I wasn't supposed to be a soldier then, I was supposed to be a soldier now. The Parachute Regiment was a part of my life to give me the bravery and the aptitude and the outright lunacy in some stages to be able to be confident enough to do what I'm doing now. Because,
and the skills.
Well, yeah, and the skill sets. But I'll be honest with you, the skill sets are very much secondary, because there has to be something that motivates you to join a regiment like that, or to join something, the abundance of work that you've done in this network is incredible. And you had to, at some point, decide to be brave and take a stand. And you have done that with no training. You've not gone through some rigorous training regime and the psychological adaptation and remoulding and breaking down and remoulding again to do what you did. So I had a skill set that I wanted, I went off and earned, and it then became applicable later on. So it was a relatively easy transition. But what motivates me currently, and what really helps me continue to do some of the work that we do, is people like yourself and all the other beautiful people in this network. Like I mentioned earlier, these beautiful little families that are so brave, so early on, and so just, they brought their children onto the street. They came with love, they came with dignity, they came with respect, and they came with courage, more importantly. And I sit there and I look at these people who have not got the military exposure, who have not got the training, and I watch them go out and be brave and speak and build podcasts and networks and platforms, and that is the inspiration that keeps me going. But the motivation is identical to the same one that helped me join. I am head over heels in love with human beings. I was put on this planet to protect people. I just had to go through a particular and specific process to get to what that end or cumulative version of myself, or the version of the word protection, means to me. So the only thing that's changed for me is the environment that I work in, but the tenacity, the motivation and the reason are amplified tenfold. And the difference being, I get to fight alongside you all now. Before, I was off in the distance in some dusty, cold place, in somewhere horrible, doing weird stuff, and everybody at home was witnessing it through an inch-thick pane of glass and only receiving it off of this one version of the story. Whereas now, I'm actually actively shoulder to shoulder with the human beings that I want to help protect. And some of the people that are bringing so much value to the scientific world and the spiritual world and every other sort of terminology that comes under the brackets of investigatory work that goes inside the environments and the you know, like you say, there's so many different avenues to look at the situation we're in globally, but there are some people that have stepped up that come from environments of education. These people carve themselves in literature and in the library and in the lab, and they have very important information that they want to share with the world, again, for one reason, just to empower the people with knowledge to allow them to make a genuine informed decision across the plethora of things that we've been trying to navigate at the minute. So even on the smallest droplet of value, by a network association and by us doing what we do, these people weren't built to be brave. These people are smart, they're educated, and they know what they do, and their information is valuable. But if you take that person, take them all the way to somewhere like Geneva, put them on a stage right out the front of UN and ask them to address thousands of people on a globe, or millions of people actually, or from a media reach perspective, and millions across the globe, and thousands of multinationals from different nations, people with, you know, there were Spanish children there, there was children from Uruguay, there was, in fact, there's people from everywhere. And for those people to stand up and speak, I wanted them to feel safe. So if the only value we bring is to make those people's heart rate stay lower, then the words will be clearer. Therefore, when they reach the ears of the audience, they will hold more weight. Then those beautiful human beings can organically take that information and relate it better because they understood it. So that's really where I see the role. It's not about jumping out of airplanes and running about in the dust and doing things like that. Those skill sets help me to learn how to do it with absolute love. So we just make people who are bringing value and knowledge to the people feel safer in foreign environments, allowing them to do their job better. We really can't stress enough. We are a tiny, tiny little shadowy cog in this machine that just every now and again when the torch comes across, you'll see a little shine out of us. We'll pop up here and we'll pop up there. But yeah, if it wasn't for people like yourself having gone through your own selection process, your own depot training, as the military call it, and integrated yourself into this world, we wouldn't have a position. If you weren't being so brave, you wouldn't need us to be brave with you. So thank you for doing what you do, because we literally can't do what you do. And given what I've watched you achieve alongside another team, a very small team in all fairness, of incredibly passionate people. Again, I know some of the lads will be laughing at me because he's turned into a right melt since he's got every 2 minutes he's trying not to cry, but it's because I have such a deep passion for watching other people get off of, get out of where they are and do something about it. And this is not easy for a lot of people. Everything that they have believed in has collapsed. It takes time to dissolve that, to digest it. Then you get angry. It's like a breakup. Then you get a little bit upset. Then you get a bit angry. Then you go a little bit loopy. Then you settle down, and then you find your place again. So I'm just grateful that I've gone through that with the entire globe. It's not just me. It's not just you. There are millions and millions of people out there who are now standing with us shoulder to shoulder. But more importantly, without aggression, just with nothing but love. That's the fuel in this machine. It's love. That's it. You pour it in, and off we go. It's done.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that for me is the embodiment of the spirit that we want to bring into this. It's been said many times, we're borrowing on we're standing on the shoulders of giants when we say we want to be the change we want to see. And I genuinely believe that we have to do that now, because in some ways what you resist is what persists. And I think one of the most powerful ways we can counter that is through our own actions, our own behaviors. And at times like this, we we need strong leadership, and I suppose we'd have to define what strong leadership means, because again, you could have a preconception of what someone may be like from the military. You know, the kind of really stoic kind of upright, and we had this across the security team, didn't we? Had these variances of different personalities and what they were bringing. But actually, you brought this really upbeat, loving, positive energy that actually had a ripple effect across the other guys in the squad. And I think that now you can see that ripple effect. And we were talking in the car about, you can, go to a train station, you smile at one person, they smile back, and accidentally someone's looking at them smiling, and then they start smiling, and then all of a sudden it's smile pinball.
Yeah. I love that term.
Yeah, and it's we can create that ripple effect around the world. But to me, this is now about leadership, and the call to arms, for want of a better word, is actually how do we bring that energy into the world around us. And for a lot of people, they don't understand how that translates into change. But ultimately, this is a cultural shift. This is a cultural shift away from this fear-based scarcity, safetyism, all of these different things that kind of underpin where we're at. And the only way to really change that is by one soul at a time, making the decision that they can contribute to the change they want to see in whichever path that they are drawn to. Because I do believe we all have different skills, we all have different backgrounds, and we could all have a role to play. Once you've become awakened or activated in terms of this cause that we're in, I do believe there is a place for everyone. And it comes with risk, but at the same time, the reward is disproportionate. And the real risk is inaction. The consequence of inaction in this time that we're alive is serious.
Yes, yeah.
So we just did a lot. You saw every single speaker walk onto that stage on Saturday. Every speaker had between 3 and 5 minutes to communicate their message to the world. You stood there and held the space for us so we could do that, as you said, and you're absolutely right. For the speakers backstage, in the environment we're working in, we're hearing all kinds of stories about people who have stood up firmly against the WHO and all these other entities, and they've faced real risks and threats. The public, I don't think, understand the nature of the work that we do to that level. We've even had criticism saying, "Why have you got so many security here in this compound behind the stage?" Until they put themselves in the position that we put ourselves in, I don't think they can properly understand the risks that's been taken. And therefore, to have someone like yourself and other members of the security team lowering our heart rate so that we can actually focus. We don't want to be looking over our shoulder. We still have to take responsibility for ourselves, and that's,
of course,
that's something we believe in. But knowing that there is a squad behind us, keeping not only us safe, but actually keeping an eye on the participants, it's so reassuring. But you watched all of these speeches from behind the stage. What would your 3 minutes be to the people at home, having experienced everything you've experienced in your lifetime and over the course of this movement? What would your 3 minutes entail at this point?
Well, that's a really, really good question, actually, because
we gave everyone else months to prepare for their 3 months, but 3 minutes, by the way, so put you on the spot.
Like I said before, face first, 100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
I think now having I know that the word shackles is the wrong word, but again, I'm not too great with finding the word sometimes. Now that I've sort of released myself from that entanglement with the military's anger and things like that, and I have grown so much over the couple of years that we've been doing this, and I've gone through all the natural emotions that everybody else has. There have been days when I've been like, I'm not getting out of bed. I'm done. It's too much. I can't deal with the responsibility of helping apply change. And what actually happened for myself was I actually had to go off for a little while and purge it and realise that my world had also collapsed down around me. And that sort of started me off on my sort of spiritual growth and understanding how I work on an energetic level. And again, this isn't going to resonate with a lot of people, and especially even less so with men and women of service, because it's just so far detached from how we're sort of engineered to think and do, So I think standing up there now and having the opportunity to speak to all those beautiful people that have made the effort to travel across the world, we actually went through like 8 border crossings in total by the time we come through 3 different countries, thousands of people. It was absolutely incredibly large-scale global operation. And if I was given and trusted with, the privilege of being able to stand up there and speak to them, you wouldn't hear a single word about the military come out of me, I don't think. I think that awareness was raised so hard, so fast, to such an extent that there isn't really many people in the British Army that haven't at some point come across that. So that information was out there, but we plant seeds, we're not there, I like to use the term that an incredibly beautiful human being that I used to spend a lot of time with, and the term she uses is, I'm not a lighthouse. A bit, it's gone from me there. And an incredibly beautiful human being that I used to spend a lot of time with used to use the term, I'm a lighthouse, not a tugboat. And that really resonated with me. So I would I'd go along the lines of trying to empower the individual and help them understand that them being there, being high vibration, being kind, considerate, and dealing with the opposing conversations that they might have with their loved ones and their families. I think my motivation would be to try and help them empower themselves as being good enough as just one. You don't need to be in your local street standing there with a megaphone screaming your belief systems. You just simply encourage people to stand in their power, to be brave, to spend time with other people that are like-minded, and to allow themselves to go through the process of digesting this, because security isn't just about physical security. There's a lot of mental security. There's work that we can do here to help ourselves resist the environment that is persistently trying to encourage us to be different to how we organically would like to be. So I think given that time, I would be really making a beeline to just make everybody, if all those beautiful faces that would be staring up at me, I think my message would be empowerment and how proud I am for those people that have come this full journey, and that we are making incredible changes. And the difficult thing about this is the changes are happening on such a sort of, when you go into the law of it, the depth of the work that has to be done is actually incomprehensible for a lot of people. That's why people like yourself and all those beautiful speakers deal with that kind of stuff. But on the consumer end and for the general public and the people that are starting to come around to the level of thinking that we're at, it would have to be empowerment and love, because you know, we worked with a multinational security team, as you mentioned. Obviously, cultural, there's going to be understandably different methods of operation. I was the only UK representative of that security team in that time. So for me, going over there solo in a foreign country with all those people and all those border crossings, and then the other lads sort of had a stature of, again, a lot of them, when it's your first time doing something as well, when somebody's educated you on how to do something, you adopt a certain frame of mind. And I used to do the same thing in the Parachute Regiment. You know, you'd go to the petrol stations when you're driving about, and you'd be like that, and you just see some beautiful woman when you're in all your gear and things like that. But what I've learned through this process is it is absolutely about love. I can be looking after a one-on-one client, taking pictures of us together, shaking people's hands, giving people cuddles, and still keeping an eye on the client that I'm working with. And because I work with clients that I'm so closely connected with and that are so paralleled in where they see the world going, they just know what Marco's about. I've got your back. Don't need to worry. You do you. We've got you, and it can be done with love, So I think some of the other guys with the security was like, who on earth is this British guy that's just turned up? He's got his shirt buttons undone, he's got his floppy hair like a traditional Essex boy, and he's taking selfies with his people, and he's cuddling everybody, and he's happy. And it was really nice. But bringing it back to the point, that's it, empowerment, love, just you are enough. Absolutely, I cannot tell you enough. You are lions and lionesses. You are the kings and queens. You are the start. You are the finish. You are the be-all of everything. And as I've said in the speeches before, if it wasn't for you doing what you're doing, I wouldn't have the strength to keep doing what I'm doing. So the more you keep doing what you do, the easier it makes my job to keep supporting that. And I don't see any of you guys slowing down anytime soon. So we're strapped in and we're excited for the ride. We're with you all the way.
Thank you, my man. I mean, it's been such a pleasure to spend time with you the last 5 days, and even just now, it's such inspiration. You're such a, well, you're a hero to me, my friend.
Oh, don't say that. You end up me in tears.
You have been a hero to me, and it's. I'll conclude, because when we get into this work, it's intense. It's intense, and when we're putting on events like this, we carry the burden. It feels like often we're carrying the burden of humanity on one level, and that's not from a hero savior mentality. It's a case of we're working so hard for our future. My son, I've just dropped him off. It's like we've just been on tour to Geneva this morning. It's back to family life straight away. I'm up with my boy this morning, getting dressed in, taking up in the pram to nursery. Real life kicks back in. But I look at my son's eyes, and he's the reason I do what I do now, but it's for the children of this world that are going to grow up into hopefully. No, I know they will grow up into a better world, because we won't cease, as absolutely as you said. But we need to bring an energy that is about that empowerment of the individual, because everyone is a leader. You don't need a title. You don't need the role of organizer. You don't need to have been in the military. life is the perfect training ground for what we are doing here. It's where we choose to set the sails from here forth. And it's easy to feel powerless when you have these global entities having such influence over the course of our own present and future. But the future is yet to be written. And we've spoken so much on this trip about being here now. The only place we can be is here right now. And the decisions that we make in this moment not only shape our own future as individuals, but can contribute to the future of the world around us. So I think it's so deeply powerful that we come back to that. And your presence throughout this process has been a constant reminder of that we are the change, which was the title of the rally. And it's easy to get caught up in the policy and the documents and the proposals, and even, coming straight back to today, reading messages. You guys haven't talked about the fact that these things have been adopted yet. It's like, we've been in the car for 1,000 miles. Give us a chance. And I heard you say something in one of your talks, the second talk, when you don't see us, that's when we're at our busiest. And absolutely right. So when there's almost this burden responsibility that we have to be seen all the time and speaking into what's going on. And I can tell you full well, when we had our debrief in the hotel the morning after our session, people aren't seeing that. They're not seeing the story, what our thinking around how do we do this better, what do we do next. But I can also tell people at home that for the 2 hours prior to our meeting, the press conference, the team that got together, the lawyers for the press conference, were already convening to talk about the next moves. They may not have done another press conference yet to address what's going on, but they are there working when you cannot see them to make these changes. And it's the same for you and I. We've spent how many hours in the car home with some of our team, dissecting what's happening and thinking about what's next. But I want to bring it back to my original point, is that with all those technical, practical matters, my mission on this earth is to help to find within me, because I've gone through my own set of challenges, I've gone through my own training ground, to find self-ownership that I feel truly authentic in myself. Is really, for me, is about helping people to come back to that for themselves too. And this, we talk about freedom and all these other things. Really, it's inner freedom that I seek, and the removal of transcending the fear of showing up fully as you are.
Yeah.
And you were a mirror for me all the way through this process. And despite the external environment, if that's all we ever achieve, was we bring people back to themselves authentically, truthfully, and with great integrity, then, well, we've succeeded. It doesn't matter what any policy gets passed, and we weren't there to say, well, you can keep going, so will we.
Yeah.
But ultimately, if we can come through this, and more people have not only awakened to the state of reality, but they've also awakened to their own true self and their own true potential, and they've developed the courage to stand in that power, then believe me, the world will change. So not only have you given us a secure presence in terms of the physicality of the work that we're doing, but as a personal thank you to me, you've reminded me of that's what my cause is, and not to get lost in the practical matters, but come back to what it's really about, which is this, for people can't often grasp it, but the soul journey or the spiritual path, it's, it comes with all kinds of loaded meaning, but really to me it's coming back to our core of why we're here, and how we show up in the world, and how we show up in the world will determine our own future. So I want to thank you for the bottom of my heart for all the support you've brought for us, and all the work that you've done over the last 4 years. And I know you would have been through a right journey like all of us.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But all these things are shaping us and making us stronger and preparing us for the road ahead. So thank you so much, and thank you so much for being with us here. Please do share this conversation. It's such a powerful message, and keep doing the great work, my man.
Oh, honestly, like I say, I've been asked to potentially come and do podcasts historically, and the work that we're doing wouldn't really allow it. And there was an element of fear in me, but because we've worked so closely, and I've truly seen how beautiful the machine is that you've built to help drive what you're doing forward spiritually, I actually felt brave enough to do it with yourself, so thank you so much for having me, giving me this opportunity to actually tell my side of that story, because
Yes.
I never thought about that. I never thought to respond or anything like that, or just talk. So I'm really grateful that you've given me this opportunity, and thank you for doing what you do. I mean, I love you with every drop of blood that runs through my veins. That applies to every human on this planet. I meant what I said in those, with the words and the speeches. We're here for you. We're going nowhere in whatever capacity that is.
Big love, my man.
I'm
Bring it
grateful.
in.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for watching today's conversation with Marco Bruin. a Parachute Regiment veteran who has been an enormous support to the freedom movement and to myself personally. There's been so many inspirational lessons from this conversation, so I please encourage you to share this conversation. And if you'd like to be part of what we're doing, head over to freehumanity.org and you can find out about what's next for us and how you can get involved. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you again very soon.